Hey, Dave Kittle here. Welcome back to the Dave Kittle Show. I am the owner of Concierge Pain Relief Home Physical Therapy in New York City and the CEO of the Fieldmaker Group, currently acquiring practices in the New York and New Jersey area. Today on the show, we have Michael Piekutoski. He is a physical therapist and the founder and CEO of Physical Therapy Practice Sales and Consulting. You can find them online at physicaltherapybrokers.com. Michael, what's going on?
Dave, great to be back on the show. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So you sent over some information for us, a document for us to go back and forth over for this episode. And today we are covering the market drivers, as well as the current physical therapy market and a 2023 outlook. So if you are a physical therapy practice owner, if you're on the edge or on the fence of thinking about selling, thinking about transitioning, possibly selling some or all of your practice, this will be an episode you'll want to listen to, maybe listen to twice, and potentially save it and store it for the next year to come. So Mike, in regards to the current market drivers, we're talking about high-level drivers. We're talking about some other components. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, right now in the news, everyone's talking about the economy and the risk of recession coming, is rising, seems like almost every day. So, I do get a lot of questions from business owners about how that would impact deal making going forward, and if we've seen anything, seen any impact, currently. So really, at the end of the day, when the economy is not going well, it will have an impact on deal structures, deal making at many levels. Whether or not it seeps into our industry, we can get into the specifics, but bankers who control the deal making industry, finance the loans and all that kind of stuff, are very risk averse. They're a risk averse group. And anytime there's a little bit of, whether it's theoretical or actual risk out there on the horizon, you'll see the bankers get a lot more skittish on making deals and whether or not they're going to make loans to people. So it has a huge risk. In addition to this, we are in a phase where the Fed has been raising interest rates significantly over the last several months, and as far as we know, that appears to be continuing into 2023. So that little change. It helps people who save a lot of money, but people who use money to finance deals, it makes those deals more expensive. And so you got two big drivers that, will impact deal making happening simultaneously: the rising interest rates and recession risk coming into play right now, which, on the grand scheme of things, if you look in Wall Street, there's definitely an impact. Look at any of the Wall Street Journal articles and articles about the banking industry right now. There's a lot of speculation of looming layoffs in 2023, and bonuses are being cut or eliminated for a lot of the bankers, which for most of those folks, that's where they make their money, on their bonus, not necessarily on their salary.
Right.
So anytime there's blood in the water like that, it definitely causes a ripple effect across the economy and across deals in general. So we have that going on outside of the PT industry, and it is having an impact. You are seeing some buyers be impacted by these drivers that are happening. By and large, to the local owner today, those things are happening in the background. And really what the local owner on a day-to-day is facing is the margin, what I call the margin squeeze. We're always under the threat of reducing reimbursement rates. CMS again is trying to cut rates again for 2023. And, Congress is trying to do a last minute save on it again. I mean, I don't know if you've been in the industry long enough, you've seen this play out. It seems like almost every year for the last 20 years. This threat of cuts, and then Congress comes in and saves some or all of it, is something that we've seen many, many times. But by and large, you're seeing a lot of payers out there try and find ways to reduce what they're paying for the average PT visit. They're taking the note from CMS and taking a note for what's happening out across the country, and they're all trying to find ways to cut those costs as best they can. And then on top of that, the average PT practice is really seeing an increase in labor costs. Since COVID, the industry lost a lot of PTs in COVID, particularly, when I sat down, I was at PPS early in November and sat down with, I think, about 8 different CEOs of various size companies across the US, and every one of them to a person said the same thing, that labor is their number one issue. I heard different takes on what's driving that, and different approaches to helping resolve that. But by and large, the theme that I heard most often from those folks is the full-time folks seem to have stayed around, but a lot of the part-time folks that you used to, handle additional volume or
Fill in the gaps for coverage.
Fill the gaps in coverage. That's really what got squeezed. And those folks either didn't come back to the market or, are just working differently than they did in the past. And so at the end of the day, what a lot of folks are doing is paying more, or increasing their benefits, or whatever they can do to attract talent to their organizations. And so we're really getting it on both ends. I mean, labor is the number one expense in a PT practice. It will generally run 50 to 60% of the average PT practice. And, when you're taking the number one expense and increasing that expense, and then also on the other side, there's threats of reduction in revenue, that's a bad spot to be in. And that's probably more important for practice owners to focus on in this environment than anything else. Is really focusing on managing their margins, keeping their people happy, keeping them engaged, and doing whatever they can to make sure that their reimbursement remains steady, or if there are ways to improve your reimbursement today, is that take advantage of any opportunity that you have.
I'm curious, any of the CEOs that you spoke with at PPS, I'm curious is if any of them mentioned to you that their thoughts on where those part-timers might have gone, if any of them said that the part-timers are going out and starting their own thing, whether a mobile practice, cash practice, some hybrid where they charge, out of pocket. Maybe they take Medicare, but they charge out of pocket for any person that has commercial insurance. Any of the CEOs mentioned that as part of a trend as well?
I don't think everyone put their finger directly on where those folks went. I think what they could tell you is that they just aren't coming back, and it's very, very difficult to find those people to fill those gaps, or when you have a practice that's growing and you need a little extra help, but you're not quite there for a full-time FTE. That's where the challenge is. I didn't get a sense from anyone as to where specifically they went. It wasn't a topic of conversation. They may know, but I certainly didn't get that into that part of the weeds with them.
Got it. Any other drivers, any other forces in the economy for market drivers before we step into the current physical therapy market?
I mean, those are the main topics that I think every practice owner needs to be aware of right now. And, as we shift into what's happening specifically in the PT market, what you'll come to understand or experience if you were to go take your practice to the market today and try and sell it. I have a buyer's list right now that has 41 active buyers on it. That's the most that there's ever been on my buyer's list ever since I've been doing mergers and acquisitions. either as a buyer or on the sell side. Even this week, I had 2 calls with new investors coming to the market, and and that's probably my 4th, 5th, or maybe even 6th call this year, with investors exploring the market or looking to come in. So, it's still very, very attractive to investors. Whether they're experienced in the space or not, we're still seeing a lot of interest in the PT space. So because of that, because we've been seeing so many new buyers and so many buyers in the market, any of the deal processes that I've been involved with in the last 6 months or so, I've seen a couple trends that really seem to be prevalent. One, we are seeing some buyers get just very selective on what deals they want to pursue and what deals they exit quickly on. And so we are definitely seeing, buyers drop out of a process really quick. However, in a even relatively small deals, I've got a list of, a dozen potential buyers that it may fit. So you might lose 6 of them, but still have 6 competing for that acquisition. So by and large, what I'm seeing is the competition's still there. As we're going through the through the sales process, the buyers are still having to be competitive with their valuations, with their multiples, and their deal terms to get to successfully navigate through a process and close a deal. So I don't know if that's I can't say for sure that that's going to hold or that's the driving force behind it. But, it just seems with all the headwinds that you have in the high level market drivers out there, you would expect to see a lot more. You see some impact in the PT market, and we're just not seeing it yet. Not saying it's not going to happen. But, as of today, as of December, December 9th, we're not seeing it yet. So, by and large, it's still a good time. It's still a favorable time for, folks who, if they're interested in selling their practice, you're still going to get a good deal, especially if you can work with someone who's going to help you through the process and find the right buyers that are going to create a competitive process for you.
Right. So in terms of putting ourselves in the shoes of a private practice owner that has maybe had their practice for 15, 20, 30 years, if they're listening, they're watching, it's still beneficial to them when you say that there's 41 active buyers or more, 41 active buyers across the US in the physical therapy market. I'm a physical therapy practice owner myself. Obviously, we're buying, we're not looking to sell. But if I were, 60, 70, 80 years old, if I was looking to exit or retire or take a step out or sell some or all of my practice, what I'm hearing from you, Mike, is these are positive signs because there's buyers that are in the market. Maybe those aggregators, those consolidators have gotten better in terms of like evaluating deals over the past decade. They've gotten better knowing that here's what they see on the front end. And then if we have this as a tuck-in acquisition, here's what we can expect on the back end. Here's the other services and things we could potentially add in. Like I just interviewed Steve, one of the VPs from Alliance Physical Therapy Partners yesterday on the show. And they have, you probably know, but they have a whole bunch of other services that they add in. For example, orthotics. That's just one of many other things, but they have so much. They have a lot of the bigger buyers will have resources and they have additional support, whether it's back office support, call centers, and Alliance Physical Therapy Partners. I didn't know this until recently, but they built their own EMR. They have their own medical records. So they have a lot of things on the back end. They have a lot of things figured out. And if I'm a private practice owner that's, let's say, if I were 55, 60, 65 years old, if I'm listening to this, you have to be positive. You have to be optimistic. Now, of course, there might be pressures on the reimbursement, as you said, and there's pressure on payroll and labor. That's just the nature of this current market as we're kind of coming out of the COVID or post-COVID pandemic. But there's a lot of positives, and therefore it's still, like you're saying, it's still a good time to potentially exit. It's still a good market to sell. And there's a lot of buyers. So that's showing that there's stability in the service, in physical therapy itself. So if there's another crazy second COVID event or some cyber attack or something, like, physical therapy is still going to be in need. It's still going to be, whether it's in a clinic, whether it's in someone's home, whether it's a work hardening, work conditioning, but that a lot of the bigger corporates and the other, USPH does, and a lot of others do. There's a lot of positives. There's a lot of benefits to private practice owners out there.
100%. Their therapy is not going anywhere. It may change a little bit in what it looks like or how the service is delivered over time, and as we're able to leverage technologies and provide services in different ways. It may change over time, but the need for qualified, skilled clinicians is only growing. And so I think that's, if you look at the market studies out there for the PT industry, it's projected to be a significant growth driver, through the next 20 years as the baby boomers work through the health system. So we still have, a huge upside for quite some time in the industry. And then even after the boomers start to navigate through, there may not be as many, in numbers, but by that time, I would hope that the PT industry has learned how to integrate themselves into the healthcare system and delivery model in a way that makes them, continue to be really super essential part of actually preventing injury and preventing surgery. And those are the things that I think are underlevered in our healthcare system today that PT can provide. And people are starting to understand, and insurance companies and healthcare delivery models are starting to understand this and starting to leverage it. I just don't know that we've seen the model that's going to take hold for the next 20 to 50 years. I don't know if we've seen that yet, but it'll be interesting as we all work through the system over the next several years to see what takes shape.
Right. And then in terms of the core offering of hands-on physical therapy, the emotional component, like the relational component of like the patient and the physical therapist interacting, speaking with each other, and then the hands-on evaluation, the hands-on treatment. I really don't see, I know there's Hinge Health and there's all, Sword Health and all these others that are basically almost like a free app through, your insurance portal or something. And that might serve some percentage of the market where they can just like open it whenever they want and do some potentially customized exercises, potentially cookie cutter exercises. Many old school practice owners are obviously going to, scoff at that and really look down on it. I really don't see in the foreseeable future, if we're talking about 20, 30, 50 years out, I don't see some app or technology or robot replacing the core service of physical therapy. And that is why, Amazon can't really come in and necessarily disrupt it. It could, like, they got into, I think, Amazon home care, and then they kind of got out of it, I think. So there's always going to be this need. And it's something that I believe cannot really be disrupted, the core offering disrupted by some app or virtual or telehealth or, some app-based where it's a physical therapist or not on the other side, or it's just, literally it's just an app and no physical therapist actually engaging in the clinical decision-making or the whole process. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. There's, whether it's a virtual visit or some kind of, AI attached to an app, I just cannot see us developing a technology yet. No, at least I haven't seen it yet, where you're going to get the same input as a clinician and be able to provide the same level of expertise as a clinician if you don't get your hands on the patient. And I think patients, by and large, prefer to have someone there to help them. This is an injury or a ailment that's bothering them, and they want to be able to talk through it. They want to ask questions, and you just can't do that on an app. You might be able to do some of that over a virtual visit, but you're just not going to be able to get the same level of care. And at some point, whether it's a ACL repair or a total joint or post-stroke recovery, there is always the clinician being there, putting hands on the patient and understanding what their needs are and what the issues are, is always going to be a better level of care than any kind of AI or virtual visit can provide. 100%. We'll never get rid of it. It may become more focused, where you're only going to get those patients that really need that, and that someone who just doesn't need a high level of care might be able to meet their need through virtual or through an AI. But as you estimated, I think that's going to be a very, very small percentage of the overall population.
Yeah, makes sense. Before we jump next into the 2023 outlook, any other components of the current physical therapy market?
I think at the end of the day, the terms and the valuations, all that stuff that I'm seeing are still favorable for sellers. And I think if you really want to sell your practice, it is still a good time. I think that's the despite all the stuff that you're hearing, it's still a good time. I think that's the nook and cranny of it, and it's because our industry has some other things going on outside of what's going on in the economy that's keeping those market forces competitive and the environment still favorable for sellers.
Which is what? What do you mean? Like just more competition from the large buyers?
If we didn't have the competition, I think we'd be seeing eroding valuations. We'd be seeing eroding multiples. We'd be seeing more terms in purchase agreements that are risk sharing or
more earnouts, more deferred payments.
Yes, different payment structures. It's going to be more of a buyer's market than a seller's market, and that's the real shift. If we start to see those things start to creep into the purchase agreements and into the conversations with buyers on a regular basis, then that's when it shifts and it becomes a buyer's market rather than a seller's market.
Great. So competition keeps things healthy. Great. And Again, so the competition also then helps the private practice owner who's listening or watching to this. There's more competition out there. There's more corporate buyers. There's more smaller buyers like us coming out. Some other physical therapists, they see the value of maybe adding a second or third location, and they could do that through some small local or regional tuck-in acquisition as opposed to opening up a de novo and starting from scratch. So there's a lot of positives out there for private practice owners across the states, different markets, whether metros or rural.
100%.
Excellent. So then next into the 2023 outlook.
Yeah. So, just kind of looking ahead is, and, no one really has a crystal ball. So, but I do get asked this all the time with practice owners and even, the CEOs that I sat down with over the last month. We like to speculate what might be happening or what might happen, and really, I always try and look at the big picture. And when you look at the big picture, and you look at all the different buyers on that list of the 41 buyers out there, there's several of them that are nearing 5 years since their original investment or their latest investment. So why is that a magic number? Well, the average hold for a private equity platform is about 4.8 years. So when you start to, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to start to see, okay, these guys are, these private equity holders of platform companies out there, that brand names that you and I know and have heard of. We're going to see some consolidation in the industry, whether, when that 5-year time clock runs out, private equity firms typically have, they have several options, but the two that are most common are they're going to recapitalize. So that means they're either going to sell to another private equity firm, usually a little larger one, or they're going to consider a strategic partnership with one of the bigger players out there. I think the market industry is right that we're going to see some consolidation where some strategic buyers are going to buy up some of the smaller buyers, smaller consolidators out there right now. That's my theory. What's going to happen? I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe even something before the end of the year, just because as you come down to December 31st, everyone tries to get that last deal in before the end of the year, and if there's been conversations going for quite some time between some of the I'll just call them the big boys in the PT market with some of the smaller companies, who knows? But I think you will see something in 2023, or maybe even possibly before the end of the year. You're going to start to see some consolidation, and it might be more than one. So I think that's probably theme number one I see happening in 2023. And I think the other thing is, from a seller's point of view, again, kind of going back to the X's and O's, keeping focused on your margins is going to be the number one thing that you're going to want to do, because once margins start to erode, then your valuation and your equity, ultimately your equity value drops. So we know what the challenges are. You know that labor is going to be a challenge, and you may or may not be facing reimbursement cuts in your market, or with your particular payer mix. But at the end of the day, you know what the challenge is going to be. Keeping and maintaining your margins are going to be job number one. If you're anticipating going into a sales cycle in the next 12 to 24 months, maintain those margins as best you can. And then number two, have a plan, have an exit plan. If you're going to do it, you got to understand what your options are, and you got to have a plan. You don't just want to, call someone like myself and say, hey, I want to, it's December 8th. I'd love to sell my practice before the end of the year. It's not going to happen. And I can't help you. And, you got to have a plan, and really you want to start looking, 2, maybe even 3 years out. I have some folks that I've worked with over the years that have started their businesses, they're a year or two into their business and already have an exit plan in place. But have a plan, because if you just jump into it when you want to try and make a quick sale, you've already put yourself in the worst position you could be in through a negotiation process. And then, the other thing that I would say, if you're going to go into a sales process in 2023, is just make sure you're working with someone that knows the industry extremely well and knows who might be the right buyers that would interest you and help you achieve your exit plan and your exit goals, not only financially, but for most business owners I work with, this is a legacy, and they want to ensure that legacy continues in such a way that makes them proud and feel confident that they did the best they could for their team that they've built over the years, and provided them the resources to continue to grow and those kinds of things. So, having someone that can really help you through the process, not only the financial part of it, but also that knows the buyers on the other side, I think is a critical piece. Not only that, but again, as we talked about, competition is going to breed the best deal for you. So, making sure you're working with someone that knows all the potential buyers out there is going to only increase the numbers for you as you go into a process. So, yeah, at the end of the day, 2023, I don't see the volume dropping off a cliff. We've been pretty steady in the second half of the year, between 6 and 7 deals closing every month. And if we were to run that rate out next year, that's still an above average year for the PT industry. I mean, typically in years past, 40 to 50 deals a year was kind of what we saw on an average. And, the year after COVID, we saw, was, an aberration. That's not probably not going to happen again. But, but now going in 2022, we're still looking at, 80 deals for this year. And, there's a strong likelihood, if we just continue the pace that we had in the second half of the year, that we're going to continue right along in that 70, 80, maybe even 90 deals next year. So I'm still bullish, even though the economy is not favorable right now, but I think the industry, and I think the amount of deals and the amount of buyers out there is going to keep the transactions going strong into 2023, despite any headwinds that we're going to be seeing.
Right. And I think you might have mentioned this on the first time you were on the show, but in regards to the tip that you were mentioning for practice owners about for them, if they're looking to sell, continue to focus on their margins. I think a few other things that you mentioned just as a recap on the previous episode was they should also continue investing in advertising, right? They should continue with their Indeed postings in terms of like having a pipeline in a funnel of new labor, of new physical therapists, or even front desk staff, whatever it might be, because some of the clients that you've had over the years, I believe you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of take their foot off the gas in some respects where they're focusing on this exit strategy. They might be dealing with you every day or every other day or weekly, whatever it is. And then they're taking their focus off the practice, the business itself. So they might, pause their marketing budget or less focus on the marketing, less focus on hiring. If folks haven't listened to the first episode, I believe that was something that we covered. And any thoughts there?
Yeah. So I have seen that, and I'm not sure if we went into this story last time or not. I can't recall, but I have seen practices that, for lack of a better word, took their foot off the gas pedal a little bit because they knew they're going into a sales process. And the last thing a buyer wants to see when you're going into a sales process is new patients dropping off or visit volume dropping off or whatever. And if it's just because of not executing on the basic blocking and tackling, keeping your staffing in place, keeping your advertising or whatever drives new patients into your practice, if you're not executing on those things because you're focused on planning, focused on an exit strategy, that's a real challenge for a buyer. If things start going backwards, it really changes the tone of the conversations and can ultimately change, the deal that you originally thought you were going into a process with. So hate to see that happen. I have seen some folks where that's happened. Unfortunately, that's always been on when I was a buyer. But at the end of the day, that is a very real issue is when you start to focus on a new, I'll call it your second career or your career after your PT operation. And you forget that you're still running your PT practice for a little bit. That's a very real phenomenon.
Right, because in some cases, the due diligence process or the process between a practice owner meeting one or more buyers, meaning they sign an NDA, maybe they send the potential buyer or buyers, they send them their financials, the last year, the last 3 years, but focus on the trailing 12 months, but they'll be sending the last 3 years. And then that process, depending on the seller and depending on the buyer, this due diligence process could be 3, 4, 5 months, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And in that span of time of 5, 6 months, yep, the trend of new patients and follow visits and monthly trends of total patients or, average collections, whatever it might be, if that starts to trail off and decrease, that'll scare off some buyers. So then buyers will say, actually, instead of, valuing your practice at X, now, maybe we'll give you or offer you 70 or 80% of that cash at close. Then some has to be some earn out over time in the future. So it could impact things quite considerably, just depending on the situation.
Exactly. And again, with the environment we're in, if we start to get into the buyer's market, you're going to see that more and more often. And that's the situation that you just want to try and avoid right now. And I have seen it happen with folks, and it is a very real phenomenon. So yes, that is absolutely a nugget. Make sure you continue to run your practice despite where you're at on your exit strategy.
Excellent. And then in regards to your team, it's how many? And it's just you, and you have some other support staff. You have some other advisors with you. Like if a practice owner ends up reaching out and learning more, what can they expect in terms of like your team and your resources and all that?
Yeah. So if depends on our activity level, but I do have some folks that'll help me, crunch numbers and those kinds of things. I run all the processes on our end. I do outsource compliance assessments, and that's part of any exit strategy I do, because quite honestly, I've gone through some processes with folks, and then we find that there's a compliance issue here or there that can stall or change the tone of a conversation. So part of an exit strategy with my firm is you will have a compliance assessment done, and that'll give you some assurance that we've cleaned up anything that needs to be cleaned up before you go in the process. And we always find something. Don't get me wrong, we always find something. But it's the major things that we want to make sure that they don't exist before going in the process. So yeah, those are my team members. We have some financial analysts and some compliance specialists that assist through, depending on what the client needs.
Excellent. So physicaltherapybrokers.com, Mike, would be the best place for practice owners to reach out to you, maybe LinkedIn or anywhere else?
Those are the two areas I'm most active in. The physicaltherapybrokers.com, you can actually schedule a free initial evaluation right on the website.
Excellent. And also, if you're listening, you guys need to connect with Mike on LinkedIn because he publishes a monthly market recap, which is really awesome, of which buyers are the regional or national buyers that are out there, how many acquisitions that they've acquired month by month. And then also by deal size. So it could be, how many were one-off locations, how many were, 5 or 6 or 7 locations, and a little bit of a write-up. I think it's maybe 2, 3, 4 pages or something each month. So you should definitely connect with Mike on LinkedIn to provide a little bit more insight and value into what else is going on out there in the market across the country, not just in your state, but across the nation.
Absolutely. That actually has been one of the most popular things that I've done. I've gotten more comments about the market write-ups than just about anything else at PPS this year. Was I can't tell you how many people pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I really enjoy reading that." It just surprised me how many people actually read what I wrote on a monthly basis. So it's been a fun experience, but there's numbers in there. So if you're a numbers person, you can really start to see some of the trends and see what's going on out there and see where the activity is. And it's very helpful as a practice owner if you're contemplating a sale now or in the future, just to kind of get some real live data.
Yeah, sounds great. Mike, really appreciate your time. Always welcome to come back on in the near future, and we certainly can chop it up more then. We talked about how the audience can connect with you and go from there in regards to their exit strategy, succession plan, and how you guys help private practice owners with their transition, with their exit, with their next step, their next chapter of their life, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Appreciate your time. Guys, if you find this valuable, helpful, share this episode with one colleague. Take the link of this episode you're listening on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. Text it or email it to one colleague that you met at PPS, you met at CSM, you met in physical therapy school or undergrad, whatever it might be. Send it to one individual that's a practice owner, clinic director, manager. Send it to someone who is business-minded and entrepreneurial like yourself. And that's all I ask for you. And we'll see you next time on The Dave Kittle Show. Thank you. Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE@CONCIERGE painrelief.com. Or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.